In today's video, we're diving into 5 dumb decisions around wild animals that ended in tragedy, from the coyote attack that claimed a toddler's life to the crocodile encounter that ended a drunken bet. But first, let's go to Montana, where an Instagram model gets mauled by a grizzly after taking a selfie. It was August 17, 2018, in Glacier National Park, Montana. The morning was cool and clear, sunlight cutting through the valley fog. It was the kind of day that drew hikers, photographers, and tourists out early. But for one visitor, the stillness ahead of noon would end violently. Riley Voss, 24, had flown from San Diego the week before. She wasn't famous, but she was trying to be. Her social media feed, 3,000 followers, mostly friends and classmates, was filled with beach sunsets, thrift store fashion, and now the outdoors. She wanted a new direction, wilderness content. She told people she was building a cottagecore adventure vibe. She had read articles about Glacier's beauty and bought all the right gear: new hiking boots, a neon windbreaker, a small tripod, and bear spray. Her parents thought the trip was spontaneous but harmless. She'd saved enough from part-time photography gigs to fund it. Riley's friends didn't see her as a risk-taker. She was simply inexperienced and probably thought she knew more than she did. She wasn't camping deep in the backcountry. She chose accessible trails where she could still get cell service and frame aesthetic shots of lakes and trees. That morning, she texted one of her friends her plan: to find the alder grove where the sunlight broke through like stained glass and take a photo in front of it. Glacier's grizzly population, around 300 individuals, was stable but closely monitored. Females with cubs were notoriously defensive. Weighing around 400 pounds, they could sprint up to 30 miles per hour and crush bone with a bite force exceeding 1,000 psi. Rangers drilled these facts into visitors daily, reminding them to make noise, hike in groups, and carry bear spray in hand, not buried in a pack. Riley had seen the warning signs at the trailhead that morning, complete with an image of a mother bear and cub. Other tourists recalled her laughing quietly, taking a picture of the sign. She later posted that picture on her social media story, captioned, "I'll be fine, haha." The first mistake came early. She passed a pair of hikers heading back, who warned her about bear activity near the grove. They'd seen scat and heard huffing noises. She thanked them, said she'd be careful, and still continued. At a bend, she stopped to set up her tripod beside a thicket of alder and berry shrubs. The area was rich with late summer fruit, a perfect feeding ground for bears. The air smelled faintly of sweet berries and musk, something she didn't recognize. Her second mistake was silence. She didn't talk, sing, or make noise. She was focused on framing the shot, stepping backward, adjusting angles. She wasn't paying attention to what was 20 feet away, half hidden in brush. A female grizzly was there, feeding with her cub. The bear likely noticed Riley first, pausing during feeding. Grizzlies give warnings: huffs, head sways, jaw pops. Riley heard the sounds but mistook them for wind. She moved closer to the tripod, her camera taking multiple photos at once. In the pictures recovered later, the first ones showed her smiling toward the lens. Then, motion blurred behind her. Witnesses on the ridge above, 2 backpackers, heard the low roar before they saw her run. She bolted forward, stumbling in the tall grass, turning halfway back toward her pack. The bear charged, covering the ground in seconds. She yanked at her pack, fumbling for the bear spray but pulled out the wrong canister, an insect repellent. She sprayed it blindly, realizing too late it wasn't bear spray. The bear swiped, striking her shoulder. The impact spun her sideways, her scream cutting short. She fell hard, rolling once before the bear was on her. It pinned her to the ground, jaws clamping on her back. The witnesses later said the sound alone told the story. Short, confused, and then abruptly quiet. The grizzly tore through fabric and flesh, biting down along her spine and shoulder blades. One arm broke instantly. She kicked weakly, her boot scraping dirt. Witnesses shouted from the ridge, trying to make noise, but they were too far. The bear lifted its head briefly, huffed, then bit again at her neck and side. When it finally stepped off, she wasn't moving. The cub sniffed at her backpack before both disappeared into the brush. The attack lasted less than a minute. The backpackers managed to get a call through after hiking up the ridge for signal. When rangers arrived 40 minutes later, alerted by the witnesses, the site was silent. They found the insect repellent canister lying a few feet from her. Bear spray was still zipped inside her bag, unused. Her death scene was methodically documented. Deep claw marks lined her back and torso. The pattern of punctures matched a defensive mother bear's strike sequence. There was no sign she'd tried to climb or run uphill, just panic in the open. After reviewing the evidence, officials euthanized the sow under Glacier's policy for defensive attacks near popular trails, confirming through necropsy that the incident wasn't predatory. Online, the story spread for a short period of time. In influencer MAULED after mistaking bug spray for bear spray. Within days, it fed into jokes and outrage. Some called it tragic. Others called it stupid. Riley's parents flew to Montana to bring her home. For 3 days, the algorithm carried her image, and it faded. Another story replaced it, another reminder of how fast the wilderness punishes ignorance. But even as Riley's mistake faded from memory, in Los Angeles, a family's Sunday picnic would prove that feeding wild animals triggers irreversible consequences. It was May 10th, 2015, in a large public park in Los Angeles, California. Families spread blankets under sycamores, kids chased each other between tables, and the smell of charcoal drifted through the picnic area. No one there expected anything worse than a sunburn. Travis Linton, 29, worked construction in Burbank and liked to say rules were for people with no common sense. His wife, Megan, also 29, handled customer service for a car rental company. They were ordinary, working parents trying to make a Sunday special for their 3-year-old Caleb. They'd packed fried chicken, chips, and juice boxes. Megan wanted cute pictures for Facebook. Travis wanted to grill and relax. Neither of them cared much for park regulations. They'd seen the "Do Not Feed Wildlife" signs countless times and treated them like decoration. Coyotes were a familiar sight around the Los Angeles parks. Locals knew them as scrappy survivors, thin but bold, often slipping between picnic areas in daylight. Rangers warned repeatedly that feeding them made them aggressive. Still, visitors tossed food anyway: chips, hot dogs, even leftovers, to get close photos. The Lintons were no different. Travis thought it was funny, a harmless way to show his son a real animal. He didn't understand that these animals, lean 40-pound predators with jaws strong enough to crush a rabbit's spine, weren't pets or mascots. They moved silently when they wanted to, watching from brush lines with a patience most people mistook for curiosity. Were opportunists conditioned by human stupidity? That afternoon, the park looked deceptively peaceful. The air shimmered with heat, and the grass around the tables had gone patchy from drought. A coyote lingered in the tree line, its coat dull gray and tan, ribs faintly visible. Megan spotted it first. She pointed, phone in hand. Travis whistled and threw a potato chip. The coyote froze and crept closer, shoulders low, eyes fixed on the food. Another chip followed, and a chicken bone. Their visitors noticed but didn't intervene. People see coyotes often and assume they're harmless. The animal inched within 20 feet, head tilted, ears twitching. Travis kept throwing food, laughing, calling it friendly. Megan filmed from a few feet away, narrating. The coyote sat down, tail curled, waiting for more. When Caleb toddled from the blanket clutching a hot dog bun, neither parent stopped him. That was the final mistake, one that mixed ignorance, arrogance, and neglect. The coyote's instincts kicked in. It saw motion and food in one small, slow-moving target. Witnesses later said the attack happened fast. The animal darted forward in a blur of gray. Megan's phone dropped. The animal clamped its jaws around the child's neck, shaking once, dragging him several feet into the grass. The scream that followed wasn't from the child, it was from his mother. Travis lunged, tripping over the cooler. He reached the coyote and kicked it hard, then grabbed Caleb's arm and pulled. For several seconds, there was a horrific tug-of-war, Travis pulling his son by the arm, the coyote jerking at his neck. The animal finally let go after being startled due to the sound of shouting and multiple approaching footsteps. The coyote vanished into the trees. Caleb lay motionless on the ground, his shirt soaked through. Travis pressed his hand against the wounds, yelling for help, but it was useless. The bite had torn deep into his neck, severing major blood vessels. Witnesses described blood pooling fast in the dirt. Megan screamed for an ambulance, but every second dragged. Rangers and LAPD units arrived within 5 minutes after multiple 911 calls. They found Travis on his knees, shaking his son's shoulders, repeating his name. Paramedics took over, but the child had already gone pale. Wildlife officers located the coyote within the hour, near the base of a hill, and euthanized it on site. A necropsy performed by wildlife authorities confirmed stomach contents of chicken bones and chips. It had been fed repeatedly, likely by visitors over several months. Wildlife officers called it a textbook case of food conditioning. The park was cleared by evening, and a temporary closure went into effect the next morning. Some people blamed the park for not fencing off the area. Others blamed the parents. Travis and Megan left California within months. Their rental house went up for sale, the neighbors saying they never saw them again. The park installed new warning signs with larger print and cited visitors under state wildlife feeding laws. Rangers said the same problem continued. People still tossing food, still taking pictures, still thinking it couldn't happen to them. It was July 22nd, 2014, in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Families posed for pictures beside steaming vents, laughing at the sulfur smell. The warning signs about keeping distance from wildlife blended into the scenery, noticed but ignored. Before noon, though, a crowd would stand frozen in silence near the lower geyser basin, staring at the body of a man who learned too late that the signs weren't jokes. Darren Copel was 45, an air conditioning technician from Kansas City. He'd driven his wife, Linda, and their 2 teenagers through the park that week in a rented SUV. It was their first real family vacation in years, planned after Linda's insistence that they see nature before the kids go to college. Darren had been unimpressed from day one. He'd complained about gas prices, the crowds, and the smell of sulfur. He was the kind of man who didn't believe in danger unless he saw it himself. To him, the park rangers were overcautious, the animals docile. He'd told his family repeatedly that bison were just big cows. He wasn't stupid in the way of not knowing better. He was stupid in the way of thinking he knew best. Every morning, he'd mock the posted warnings, reading them aloud in a sarcastic tone. He laughed at other tourists taking photos from the boardwalk, muttering that people were scared of grass eaters. When Linda told him about a news story of someone gored years prior, he brushed it off as bad luck. The irony was that Darren thought of himself as practical, a man who fixed machines for a living, used logic, and distrusted experts. The lower geyser basin was a wide, open stretch of steaming ground, dotted with boiling pools and herds of bison grazing on dry grass. The park's bison population numbered in the thousands, with mature bulls weighing up to 2,000 pounds and standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Despite their size, they could sprint at 35 miles per hour and pivot faster than a horse. Rangers warned that bison injured more people each year than bears or wolves combined. Still, people treated them like props for vacation photos, walking too close, speaking softly like they were tame. That morning, a bull bison grazed near the safety barrier, about 50 yards from the walkway. Tourists stopped to take pictures, content to keep their distance. Darren wasn't. His son filmed on a small camera as Darren climbed over the railing. Several witnesses later confirmed his wife's voice could be heard on the video telling him to stop. He waved her off and trudged toward the animal, grinning at onlookers. At about 20 feet, the bison lifted its head and stared. Darren stopped, shrugged, and turned around as if to pose. Someone in the crowd muttered that he was too close. He took another few steps forward, closing the gap to 10 feet. His daughter later said he wanted a natural shot, with the bison looking directly at him. He waved his arms in the air to get its attention. The bull's tail flicked once. It lowered its head and pawed the ground, a clear textbook warning. Several people on the boardwalk started backing away. Darren, grinning, kept his back turned, adjusting his hat. He never saw it start to move. The bison charged, its hooves striking hard and fast. Witnesses said the animal covered the distance in less than 2 seconds. The impact was brutal. The horn entered his abdomen, just above the pelvis, lifting him clear off the ground. The force flipped him sideways, his body twisting unnaturally before hitting the dirt. For a moment, he lay motionless. Then the bull lunged again, hooking him beneath the ribs and throwing him several feet. His scream was short and sharp, ending abruptly as he hit the ground. The sound of the trampling was sickening, a thud and crunch that silenced the crowd. The bison stomped once on his chest before swinging its head and walking off, breathing hard, tail raised. Other tourists saw Linda run forward, dropping to her knees beside him, while screaming at them to call for help. Blood spread quickly through his shirt. The horn had torn through his abdomen and out his lower back, shattering ribs and rupturing internal organs. A ranger later stated that the injuries were not survivable. His eyes were open, but there was no recognition left. When rangers arrived minutes later, they secured the scene and pushed back the crowd. One ranger checked for a pulse, but shook his head almost immediately. Linda's hands were covered in blood. The kids stood several yards away, frozen. Paramedics declared him dead where he fell. The cause of death was listed as massive internal trauma due to bison goring. Rangers cleared the area, herded the animal away, and reopened the trail the next morning. The Park Service released a short statement reminding visitors that bison are unpredictable and can run 3 times faster than humans. It wasn't the first visitor injury that year, and it wouldn't be the last. His family refused interviews. They left the park that evening, driving straight back to Kansas City without stopping. A small local obituary ran 3 days later, omitting the details of how he died. As the bison's hooves left their final imprint on Darren in Florida, an exotic bird breeder would discover that calling cassowaries gentle giants means nothing when breeding season awakens their prehistoric fury. It was March 27, 2016, in Gainesville, Florida. On a small private property outside town, 2 cassowaries cassowaries stalked their pen in slow circles. They were beautiful, prehistoric-looking birds, towering, black-feathered, crowned with hard casques. By nightfall, one of them would be pacing over the body of its owner. Elliot Crane was 38, a self-taught, exotic bird breeder who treated his backyard collection like a miniature zoo. He owned peafowl, emus, crowned cranes, and the cassowaries, his pride. He was known online in a small exotic pet forum as the guy who proved cassowaries could be handled safely with calm energy. His videos showed him hand-feeding fruit to them through the fence and bragging that they were misunderstood. In reality, he was a hobbyist who thought familiarity meant control. He wasn't malicious, just naive and overconfident, a dangerous mix when dealing with one of the deadliest birds on the planet. He ran the menagerie mostly alone, a few acres of pens and sheds behind his house. He made enough money breeding parrots and rare pheasants to fund his collection. Friends said he wanted to open a small educational park one day. That goal blinded him to risk. Wildlife officers had warned him twice about his cassowaries after being noted by his guests. Inspection reports later confirmed prior concerns about enclosure safety. He ignored them, claiming his birds were tame. He treated them like oversized pets, walking near them without a barrier, feeding by hand, and posting selfies from inside the enclosure. He convinced himself his familiarity meant safety. The cassowary pen sat at the back of the property, fenced with a 6-foot chain link, shaded by palms and overgrown ferns. That day, the ground was slick from the morning storm. The male cassowary, a 6-foot-tall, roughly 130-pound bird, had been especially agitated. It was breeding season, when males guard nests and become aggressively territorial. Cassowaries can sprint up to 30 miles per hour and leap over 5 feet in a single bound. Their inner claw, 5 inches long, acts like a dagger capable of slicing through flesh and bone. Wildlife officers described them as living velociraptors, and that's not exaggeration. Elliot knew this. He just thought his hand-raised birds were different. The first mistake came early that afternoon. Neighbors said they heard him talking loudly in the pen, likely calling to the birds while cleaning. According to later scene reconstruction, he'd entered right after the rain stopped, boots slipping slightly on the wet mud. A long rake and a bucket of feed lay near the fence, signs he'd planned routine maintenance. One of the cassowaries was near the far end, pacing. The other, the male, was closer, its casque lowered slightly, feathers puffed. These were clear warnings. Elliot ignored them, like he always did. At some point, he slipped. The ground inside the pen had turned soft and uneven from the storm. Investigators later found a heel print skidded across a wet patch beside the water pan, then a broad smear where he hit the ground. That was the trigger. To a cassowary, sudden motion near its territory means threat. Witnesses weren't present, but the scene reconstruction told enough. He fell backward, scrambled, and likely made eye contact. The male closed the distance almost instantly. The first kick hit his thigh, the claws tearing through jeans and deep into muscle. The second connected higher, ripping open his groin and severing his femoral artery. He tried to roll away, leaving gouges in the mud where his hands clawed for traction. The cassowary kept striking, rapid two-legged jumps that brought both feet forward, each blow driving talons into soft tissue. The bird's weight and speed turned each kick into a weapon. Evidence showed defensive wounds on his arms and forearms, suggesting he tried to block the attacks, but it didn't matter because he was bleeding out in seconds. The screams carried beyond the property line. A neighbor later said they lasted less than 30 seconds, ending suddenly. By the time the neighbor arrived, the cassowary stood near the body, feathers fluffed, hissing. The gate to the pen was ajar. Elliot lay on his back, motionless, eyes open, surrounded by churned mud streaked with blood. His jeans were shredded. The fatal wound, a deep gash across the upper thigh, had pumped out enough blood to stain the soil black. Deputies and wildlife officers arrived minutes later after being called by the neighbor. They used poles and barriers to corner the cassowary, which paced and hissed as if still guarding its territory. Once sedated, they removed it from the enclosure and confirmed Elliot was dead at the scene. Paramedics noted catastrophic blood loss and multiple lacerations consistent with cassowary kicks. A medical examiner later confirmed femoral artery transection as the primary cause of death. His death was instant in biological terms. He bled out before he had a chance to crawl to the gate. Wildlife conservation authorities euthanized the cassowary the next morning. It wasn't out of vengeance, it was policy. Any animal that kills a human is considered too dangerous to keep. Elliot's forum community, almost 100 people, posted brief memorials calling him a passionate animal lover. The truth was simpler and less flattering. His property was cleared within a month. Elliot's Scott's family held a small funeral at a local church in Gainesville a week later. His daughter spoke briefly, describing his lifelong fascination with animals and how much time he spent caring for them. His remaining exotic birds were transferred to a licensed rehabilitation facility under wildlife authorities' supervision. The cassowary's dagger-like claws found its mark in Elliot's ignorance. Meanwhile, in Australia's Northern Territory, a camper would learn that saltwater crocodiles view splashing humans as nothing more than dinner delivered to its doorstep. It was September 7th, 2013, along the Mary River in Australia's Northern Territory. The air was thick with humidity and the constant buzz of insects, and the water moved slow and deceptively calm under the moonlight. To anyone familiar with the area, it was the kind of night that warned people to stay back from the riverbank. But to Declan Murren and his friends, it was just another stop on their long weekend camping trip. A night of laughter, cheap beer, and poor decisions that would end with one of them gone. Declan was 33, a refrigeration technician from Darwin. He was known among co-workers for being confident to the point of arrogance. He'd grown up near the coast, fishing in crocodile country, and liked to tell people he could read the water. He wasn't reckless by nature, but alcohol had a way of amplifying his need to prove a point. His friends described him as the one who always pushed things just a little too far, climbing higher, driving faster, testing limits just to see where they'd give. That weekend had been his idea. He'd gathered 6 friends for a 3-day trip at Cahill's Crossing on the Mary River, one of the most notorious crocodile habitats in the country. The men brought tents, coolers, and an old Bluetooth speaker. They ignored the large yellow warning signs near the bank that depicted a stylized crocodile silhouette. To them, it was just a symbol, something meant to scare tourists. They joked that locals exaggerated the danger to keep the best fishing spots to themselves. By late evening, several empty cans lay scattered around the fire pit, and Declan was in the middle of his 6th beer when he made the bet. The Mary River, wide and slow, cuts through floodplain country lined with pandanus and paperbark. At night, the surface reflects the stars like oil. Beneath that calm are some of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in the world, massive reptiles that can exceed 16 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. These predators ambush from below, relying on patience and stealth. Their jaws can exert over 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, and once they have hold of prey, escape is nearly impossible. Throughout the day, the group had seen multiple warnings. Locals passing in a ute had told them not to camp near the crossing. Earlier that evening, they'd spotted a floating log that turned out to have eyes. It submerged silently when someone pointed a flashlight at it. Declan brushed it off as just watching. Even when a bull croc slapped its tail upstream, sending ripples through the shallows, he laughed it off. It wasn't ignorance. He knew how dangerous they were, but years of hearing the same cautionary tales had dulled the threat into something abstract. He decided the river was only dangerous for the careless. Close to midnight, men gathered near the edge of the water, voices raised over the hiss of insects. They'd been drinking for hours, arguing over whether anyone actually swam in the river anymore. Someone joked that if Declan really wasn't afraid of crocodiles, he should prove it. Declan stripped off his shirt and walked toward the muddy slope, still grinning. The others half cheered, half protested. He stepped into the river barefoot, sinking into the silt. The water reached his knees, then his waist. He splashed once, sending arcs of water glittering under the moonlight, shouting that crocodiles were scared of people. For a few seconds, nothing happened, just the sound of water and laughter. Then the surface bulged 10 feet behind him. The crocodile's head rose almost soundlessly. Witnesses later described it as too fast to register. The animal closed the distance in less than a second. The first impact sounded like a gunshot as the jaws clamped over Declan's torso. His body folded, and the water exploded around them. He made one high, startled cry before being pulled under. The water churned, bubbles and thrashing visible in the beam of a flashlight. The others froze for a moment, too stunned to move. Then came a muffled yell, and the water went still again. For a few seconds, everyone stood in silence. Then one man ran forward, shouting Declan's name, but the river gave nothing back. One man grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the river. 2 glowing eyes reflected the beam 20 yards out, stationary, watching. A faint red stain spread from where Declan had gone under. Search teams arrived at dawn after one of them called for help. The men hadn't slept. They sat near the bank, hollow-eyed, their campsite littered with crushed beer cans and trampled grass. Police and rangers launched boats downstream. The Mary River current was slow but deceptive. The murky water hid everything beneath a thin green film. About a mile downriver, near a snag of branches, a ranger spotted a shape caught against a log. It was Declan's body, body, missing his left arm and part of his lower torso. Police described the injuries as consistent with a large saltwater crocodile's feeding behavior. Not a single strike. Wildlife officers set a trap near the crossing that evening, a steel cage baited with meat. Within 2 days, they captured the crocodile, a massive animal with deep scars along its flanks. Parks and wildlife staff measured it at 13 feet 4 inches long and performed DNA tests on material recovered from the remains. The officers euthanized it, citing the risk to other visitors. Declan's funeral was held 4 days later at a small chapel near his parents' home. About 50 people came, mostly family and co-workers. His brother called it a stupid accident, saying Declan's stubborn streak had finally caught up with him. His mother kept the coffin closed and barred the media from entering. A police spokesperson later confirmed alcohol was a contributing factor and called the death preventable. The friends who'd been with him didn't speak publicly about it again. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.